Hello everyone, Formula 2 cars were back on track in racing action this weekend down under in Australia, and as always, they delivered some fantastic action. With me today to reflect on the opening round of the season in Melbourne are Formula 2 journalist Martin Lloyd and Inside F2's Antonia Denya. Martin, it was great to have F2 cars on track again. What stood out for you?
I thought it was a really drama-filled weekend of racing, perhaps more than necessarily I expected from Melbourne. Really enjoyed the weekend, and I think for me, the standout performances come from Nicolas Solov taking that feature race win, and also I want to give an early shout out to Lawrence van Hoopen. I thought that was a fantastic performance to get third place on Sunday as well.
Absolutely, Van Hoopen going from 11th to 3rd, returning Trident to the podium. Tony, welcome to the show, your debut with us. Welcome along. Tell us who or what impressed you most this weekend in Australia.
So, as Martin similarly said, the chaos at the season, it's very much it's got lots of enjoyment and entertainment. And I think the driver that impressed me the most was Rafael Kamara because of his consistency that he showed all across the weekend, like he's demonstrated in his past championships.
Absolutely. He really did settle in really well, like many of the F3 graduates this season. And we will discuss those. But coming up on today's show, we'll obviously be discussing Nicolas Solov's feature race victory and the dramatic collision of the road-in drivers on lap 3. We'll also be reflecting on Josh Dirksen winning Saturday's sprint race for the second year in a row down under. We'll look back at Colton Herta's debut in Formula 2. We'll chat all about the F3 graduates and how they did down under. We'll also be looking back at how mine and Martin's predictions ahead of the weekend, well, they don't seem to have aged very well, but we'll get to that towards the end of the show. But let's start with the feature race. Obviously, Nicolas Solov took the win, but he was given a little bit of assistance in getting there by the road-in drivers. We'll start with them first because it happened so early on. To quote Murray Walker, it almost happened immediately. Martin, what on earth were those two doing?
I think it's a very good question, Aaron. I was watching the race, and you can see Dunn coming across, and you're thinking, then they're not going to collide. They're not going to collide. It's lap 3. Then they're not going to collide. There's so much time. You know, if you just zoom out for a moment, this is a team in first and second who came 7th in the team's championship last year, with a very, very realistic opportunity. Okay, with a long way to go, but a realistic opportunity of getting a double podium, if not a 1-2. You know, a chance of getting a full 43 points from the feature race. To throw that away so early on, like that, so dramatically, I thought was a real shame for Rodin. I don't think it's a particularly controversial opinion of where the blame lies. I think it was a misjudgment from Dunn, aggressively cutting back across Stenchorn. I can see what he was trying to do in terms of trying to limit Stenchorn's ability to cut back at him up the inside into that chicane, but it was just too much, overestimating how far ahead he was of Stenchorn in that scenario. And I just think in the history of Dunn's incidents from last year, in the context of Stenchorn really being in his first full season in F2 and having that happen in his first feature race this season, it was just so disappointing for Rodin. And I think it goes without saying that this is the sort of thing that we hoped Alex Dunn might have put behind him, but I think maybe it is part of his driving style, and it's just something that if we have the speed, perhaps it's something that with his speed comes this aggression as well, and that aggression is not always a bad thing. It's produced some incredible racing for us and some incredible pace, but unfortunately, if that's the side effect of it, then that's something that he's going to have to deal with, because it is going to continue to limit his ambitions to win the F2 championship and maybe to reach Formula 1 as well.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right to mention the aggression can be the making of Alex Dunn, because we saw last year his ability to overtake other drivers is just phenomenal.
Imola comes to mind. It was sensational display.
Yeah, exactly. And it does also leave him open to these sorts of incidents. And I thought it was really interesting on the radio where he vowed that Stenshorn would never beat him again in a session. And if he wants to be F2 champion, that's going to have to ring true, because Stenshorn has shown that he is no slouch behind the wheel of a Formula 2 car. And obviously that paved the way for Solov to go and collect the victory, but he did have to hold off Rafa Kamara. Tony, how impressive was the Bulgarian's drive on his way to the top step?
I mean, he clearly has shown that he's a very competitive driver with a very aggressive racing style. And he is from the Red Bull Academy, and Red Bull is notoriously known for having those aggressive and powerful drivers. So I really think that he did them proud, essentially, by really going after that title. And he was much quicker than I thought he would be this weekend.
He showed at the back end of last year that the speed was there. He was able to get his elbows out in Qatar, and he delivered a podium, of course, towards the end of the season as he sort of filled in. Would you say this is a result that has been coming, Tony?
I would say it's definitely, he is someone who is to be in the making of a really confident and great driver that Red Bull tends to produce out of these young rookies. And having that experience from last season, he did 4 races, I believe. So having that experience, I think, really benefits him as he's starting to do his full season now, so he can really show off his talent.
Absolutely. And he showed it off to the maximum on Sunday. Obviously, that all came after Josh Dirksen became the first Formula 2 driver to win twice at Albert Park on Saturday. And obviously, last season, the feature race was cancelled, so Dirksen remains championship leader all the way to Bahrain. This time, it didn't quite go to plan on Sunday, but the speed looked to be there for Dirksen and Invicta. Tony, do you think he can sustain that promise?
I think he's definitely one of those drivers who are possibly going to be in a championship battle. So I think from what he showed at the sprint race, which he showed last year as well, that he definitely does. You can't argue with him being a competitor and a really confident one. If Invicta keep up the pace, they can really, Rafael and Joshua can really look like one of the top 2 contenders of the championship this year.
And Martin, just a word on Josh Dirksen's teammate, Rafa Kamara. Didn't get some points in the sprint race, but did come home second in the feature race. Qualified in the top 10 as well. That's a solid debut for the F3 champion, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very impressed with Rafael Kamara this weekend, outside of that crazy 1 or 2 lap spell in the sprint race where I think he lost 8 positions. He was in 3rd place, and just that momentum and having to watch his mirrors every corner, being almost caught unawares by every move, was really, really hurting him. And so finishing 11th in the sprint after being in such a good position would have been disappointing. But to bounce back from that, to come second in the feature race, okay, he didn't really look like challenging Solov towards the end after he'd taken an extra few laps to get past Nico Veroni on the alternative strategy. But to get second place in your F2 feature race debut is really nothing to be sniffed at. And I think I might sound like a bit of a broken record this season saying this, but that's exactly the kind of drive that Leonardo Fornaroli put in last season in that very team, and that in that very car to go to the title 1 round early. So I think it's a very, very positive start for Rafa Kamara in F2.
Absolutely. And lots of eyes will have been on how the reigning F3 champion was going to do. Obviously, following Leonardo Fornaroli, F3 champ, became F2 champ. He followed Gabriel Bortoleto, F3 champ, became F2 champ. And there was another driver that a lot of eyeballs will have been on this weekend, Martin. Colton Herta, in at High Tech, switching over from IndyCar to Formula 2 with the aspiration of becoming a Formula 1 driver, potentially with Cadillac. That's who he's testing with at the moment. He's their sort of reserve driver. Is it safe to say that this was a weekend for Colton Herta that got better as it went on, and that there is still a lot of learning for him to do?
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a really difficult learning process for for Colton Herta, because it was a comment that Mick Schumacher made the other day, of course, a recent joiner or a recent signing to IndyCar. He said that the IndyCar is like an F2 car, but with better tyres. And think about from Herta's position, he's now in an IndyCar with worse tyres, and that's quite a big adjustment for him to make. I think that in qualifying, okay, coming in 14th was slightly disappointing, but only 10th behind Ritomo Miata, who's been in the series for a couple of years and is a very talented driver, as we all know. And then the sprint race, I guess you can kind of almost ignore the result, because he was in 13th place around that grid spot, and then he dropped down to 16th towards the end when that aggressive strategy of going for new tyres in that late safety car period didn't quite work out. But then to come through in the feature race, to stay out of trouble, of which there was a lot, to come home in 7th, again, only a couple of places behind his teammate Ritomo Miata, I thought was a very good drive. And I think for Colton, especially in this early part of the season, it's much less almost about winning feature races, getting on the podium, getting pole positions, and actually just acquainting himself with the car, because we know as soon as there's that click, as soon as, in his words from the other week, he gets fluid with the car, he's going to be one of the quickest drivers on that grid. So I think it's just a case of patience with him at the moment in terms of getting to the very front, but to climb 7 places on your feature race debut, and just to start that well, staying out of trouble, I thought was pretty impressive for anyone's first F2 weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone who's watched IndyCar over the last few years, and I've caught bits and pieces of it, when Colton Herta's on it and he's at one with the car, he is very, very difficult to beat. He's got amazing car control as well. So there is definitely a lot more to come from him. And in terms of his learning with the machine that he's got at his disposal now, I think there is a lot of low-hanging fruit to get, and we'll see some rapid improvement. And I think the sprint race was a bit of an eye-opener for him, because he was in the thick of the action. He got into a bit of a tangle with Solov, and I think he learned a lot from that experience, which he put into practice for Sunday, which helped him keep his nose clean, which is really good. And obviously High Tech, a team that's done well over the last couple of seasons, challenged for the team's championship last year and the drivers' championship in both of the previous years with Paul Aaron and Luke Browning. They'll be hoping potentially to have one of their drivers go all the way this year. We're going to stay with the theme of rookies, Tony, and we saw 2 rookies on the podium on Saturday alongside Josh Dirksen, Noel Leon and Tasanapol Inthrapufasak. And how impressed are you with their drives? Obviously, that was their first races at this level.
From my perspective, I feel like they were very impressive. Like all the rookies, I feel like this season has really jumped on it and locked in and managed to get a really good result, or the best result that they can. So I think it is play by ear as we go along the season and see how each race goes, to really truly see what they are capable of. But I think to start a season, I mean, it's what they can ask for anything more. And I think the academies will be very impressed. It's like scouting season. They're going to be looking to see if they can get within an academy. And I think they couldn't start it off any better.
Do you feel that it shows that obviously the broad success that the F3 graduates have had this weekend? Do you think it shows that Formula 3 is fulfilling its role as that stepping stone between the sort of more local regional formulas to Formula 2, which is obviously the stepping stone towards F1 or other senior motorsport series?
I think definitely. Formula 3 is beneficial. It's like you're going up a ladder, so it's one step to another step to another step, and it comes with more challenges, more competition from different countries all coming together to compete for the same thing and the same opportunities. So I definitely think that having Formula 3 to have more of that diverse cultural people from different backgrounds with different capabilities and different racing styles, to put them all together to compete, I think it's the backbone of true and great racing and drivers.
Absolutely, completely agree with that. And Martin, we saw a full complement of rookies on the podium in the feature race. Obviously, Nikola Solov taking the victory. We've spoken about Rafa Kamara, who was second. And you mentioned Lawrence van Hoopen, who returned Trident to the podium. They haven't been on the podium since Baku 2024. That was with Richard Verschoor. Tell me about his performance and how impressed you were, and obviously how pleasing it is to see a team that's been a mainstay of Formula 2 having some good times again.
I've got to say, I was extremely impressed with Lawrence Van Hoopen all weekend. The context of it being that this is a team that scored only 2 points last season, that was bottom of the team's championship table. This is a driver that was really expected to kick on with ART in F3 last year after finishing 13th in 2024. Only was able to finish 12th last year, so only improving by 1 place. And then you come into the first full Formula 2 season after, let's be honest, a tricky few rounds at the end of last season, and he puts in that performance, not only in the feature race but also in the sprint race, coming 7th. And I think if you'd have offered that to Trident at the start of the weekend, they'd have slapped your hand off for it, because that equaled their points total for the whole of last season. To go from 11th to 3rd, it's just been unheard of in that team in the last 18 months or so. You mentioned Richard Verschoor there, and I think it's a really interesting comparison. Richard Verschoor, another Dutch driver, of course, who, yes, wasn't able to bring results with Trident all the time, but he had a lot of podiums, a lot of wins, and would have had a lot more wins if he hadn't been disqualified half the time for technical infringements. So if Lawrence Van Hoopen can do anything like what Richard Verschoor was able to do with Trident a few years ago, I would be very, very impressed. And just for Trident, at the moment, they've now got a driver who is 3rd in the drivers' standings. They've got a team that's 5th in the drivers' standings. I'm fully aware we're only 1 round in, but to have that after the first round, given the year they had last year, I think will be so pleasing for them.
It's a massive confidence boost, isn't it? And it really, I suppose, when teams have been on a rotten run and then they get that breakthrough result, I suppose that not only for the drivers but for the mechanics as well and the people supporting the team, that's massive, isn't it?
You can see the step that they've made in performance over the winter. I was talking to Sami Megatunov last year, and he was saying to me that the biggest issue for them was the difficulty in finding a balance in practice, and that wasn't just him. You could see that in qualifying, the drivers just weren't able to get up to speed with the rest of the grid. Van Hoopen, qualifying 11th, so only 200ths, I believe, outside of reverse grid pole, doesn't let that close shave affect him, and puts in that performance. I just thought it was very, very, very impressive, and I'm sure there's some John Bennett fans watching. I'm sure there's more to come from him soon as well.
Absolutely, there is. And I think there's a lot to come from several drivers and teams over the rest of the season. Now, before the weekend, you might have seen on the Inside F2 social channels that Martin and I made some predictions for the pole position, sprint race and feature race winners. Now, we're going to tally this up as we go throughout the season. It's 3 points for a correct prediction and 1 if the person you pick ends up in the top 3 in that session. So there were only 4 points scored between the 3 of us who made predictions. Our editor, Jenny Craig, who's been on the show before, joined us in that. Now, Martin, 3 of the points were scored from your prediction for Dino Beganovic to get pole position, which he duly did on Friday afternoon. And I got a point because Alex Dunn was my pick and he was 3rd. So I get myself off the mark. Sadly, neither of us got any of the race winners correct. We both predicted Nicholas Solov would win, but we both said the sprint race. And Jenny also correctly predicted that Josh Dirksen would win a race, but she said he'd win the feature race. So they were the only points scored. So Martin has an early lead of 3 points. I have a point, and Jenny has yet to score. Let's take it.
I will say very briefly, if anyone watched the championship predictions video and the season predictions video recently, I did predict, I believe, Nicholas Solov to be the first new winner. So that's come true. That's an extra mental tick, even if I don't get a point.
I think I did that as well. So pound the back to us. Excellent. Right, let's have a look at the championship standings then. And Nikola Solov, after his feature race victory, has an early lead in the drivers' table. He's 7 points clear ahead of F3 champion Rafael Kamara. Ritomo Miata and Tsanopol Intrapufasat both scored in each race, and they are in the top 5. Moving to the team standings, Campos are the early pace setters, 4 points ahead of Invicta, with High-Tech in 3rd. Trident's return to the podium has them 5th, but VAR and AIX are both yet to score. My thanks go to Tony and Martin for joining me on today's show, and thank you to you guys as well at home for tuning in. We'll be back soon with more Formula 2 content, so hit the like button and subscribe to stay up to speed with everything Formula 2. From me, Aaron Harper, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.